Maple Grove Estates wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a carefully curated ecosystem of manicured lawns, unspoken rules, and passive-aggressive sideways glances. I'd lived here long enough to understand the delicate social choreography, until Karen arrived and decided to rewrite every unwritten rule. The moving truck rolled in on a Tuesday morning, precisely at 8:37 a.m. I know the exact time because I'm that guy who notices details. 42 years old, divorced for 7, with a classic car restoration business that keeps me busy and a teenage daughter who thinks I'm simultaneously the coolest and most embarrassing dad on the planet. My 1967 Mustang, a cherry red convertible I'd spent 15 years meticulously restoring, sat in the driveway like a work of art, every curve polished, every chrome detail gleaming. She wasn't just a car. She was my masterpiece, my connection to a past when things were simpler, when a man could park his vehicle without facing a tribunal of suburban bureaucrats. Karen's moving truck was beige, not cream, not off-white, but a specific shade of bureaucratic beige that seemed to scream complaint form before she even unloaded a single box. Her outfit matched perfectly, a khaki ensemble that looked like it had been ironed by someone with military-grade precision. But it was the clipboard that told me everything I needed to know. Most new neighbors might bring a casserole, maybe wave hello. Karen brought a clipboard, a tape measure, and what I can only describe as the energy of a middle management inspector about to audit the most important spreadsheet of her life. I was working in my garage, restoring a '69 Camaro for a client, when I first noticed her. The garage door was open, classic rock playing just loud enough to drown out the world. Fleetwood Mac's Dreams was spinning on an old record player I'd kept since college, a relic that was more decoration than functional these days. She stood at the property line, clipboard pressed against her chest, measuring something. Always measuring. The tape measure extended, retracted, extended again. I watched her through the reflection in my toolbox, trying not to be obvious. My daughter Emma would have found this hilarious. "Dad," she'd say, "you're being weird again." She was 17, which meant everything I did was simultaneously fascinating and mortally embarrassing. Karen moved with a purpose that suggested she believed the entire neighborhood was her personal urban planning project. Each step calculated, each glance a potential violation waiting to be documented. The clipboard wasn't just an accessory. It was a weapon, a symbol of her impending suburban conquest. Little did I know that clipboard would become the instrument of the most ridiculous property dispute in Maple Grove Estates history. As she finished her initial reconnaissance, Karen looked directly at my Mustang. Not a casual glance, but a measured, calculating stare, the kind of look a general might give a battlefield before planning an invasion. I should have known then. The moment our eyes met across the perfectly trimmed lawn, something shifted. This wasn't just a new neighbor moving in. This was war. And my beautiful Mustang. She was about to become ground zero. A week after Karen's arrival, the neighborhood started to change. It was subtle at first, like a low-pressure system moving in before a storm. Neighbors who once chatted casually over fences now spoke in hushed whispers. Lawn maintenance became an Olympic-level competitive sport. I first realized the full extent of Karen's mission on a crisp Saturday morning. I was washing the Mustang, my weekend ritual that was part maintenance, part meditation. Each microfiber cloth stroke was a careful dance, removing dust from chrome that gleamed like a mirror. The car wasn't just transportation. She was my legacy, a piece of automotive history I'd lovingly restored over 15 painstaking years. That's when I saw her, Karen, standing at the edge of her perfectly manicured lawn, yellow measuring tape extended like a weapon of suburban destruction. She was wearing what I can only describe as tactical khaki, cargo pants with more pockets than a pool table, a button-up shirt that looked like it had been pressed by military ironing specialists, and a sun hat that seemed more suited to an archaeological expedition than a residential street. Her eyes were fixed on my Mustang with the intensity of a heat-seeking missile. I watched, part amused and part concerned, as she began her meticulous measurements. She'd stretch the tape, consult a small notebook, then stretch it again. The tape measure became an extension of her arm, snapping and retracting with militant precision. My neighbor Glenn, a retired math teacher who lived on the street for 30 years, wandered over, coffee mug in hand. "You seen this?" he muttered. I nodded, never taking my eyes off Karen. "Looks like she's planning something." Glenn chuckled, a dry sound that spoke volumes. "Oh, she's definitely planning something. That woman's got more rules in her head than I had mathematical theorems in my classroom." The measurements continued. Karen was now walking the length of my driveway, stopping at precise intervals, marking something in her notebook. I noticed she brought what looked like a laser level, the kind of tool more suited to professional surveying than residential living. My daughter Emma chose that moment to emerge from the house, phone in hand. She took one look at the scene and burst out laughing. "Dad," she said, "is that lady measuring our driveway?" "Appears to be," I responded, trying to maintain my composure. Emma raised her phone, clearly about to start recording. This is gonna be epic for my TikTok. I intercepted the phone with a dad-like swiftness. Absolutely not. But Karen was undeterred. She pulled out a protractor, and began measuring the angle of my Mustang's parking position. I watched in disbelief as she meticulously calculated the precise degree of the car's placement. Glenn leaned in, whispering, 2 degrees. She's gonna get you on 2 degrees. I thought he was joking. Turns out, he was prophetic. The first official communication came 3 days later. A manila envelope, so crisp it could have cut glass, arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a formally typed document with multiple color-coded charts detailing the suboptimal parking configuration of my Mustang. The violation: my car was parked at a 47-degree angle instead of the community-approved 45-degree standard. I looked at Emma. Emma looked at me. We both started laughing. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of the most ridiculous suburban battle in Maple Grove Estates history. If I thought Karen's measuring tape was the extent of her obsession, I was monumentally wrong. The documentation she compiled was less a neighborhood complaint and more a doctoral dissertation in parking criminology. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday, heavy enough that the mailman actually grunted when he handed it to me. Emma was sitting on the front steps, scrolling through her phone, and looked up with immediate interest. "Dad," she said, "that looks serious." Serious didn't begin to cover it. Inside was a meticulously organized binder, 3-ring, navy blue, with a label that read Reynolds Parking Violation Documentation in bold, laser-printed letters. I'm not talking about a casual folder. This was a professional-grade archive that would make 5 evidence managers look disorganized. The first page was a cover sheet with my full name, address, and what appeared to be a forensic analysis of my Mustang's parking habits. Color-coded tabs separated different sections: photographic evidence, angle measurements, temporal parking analysis, community standard violations. Each section was further subdivided with a precision that was simultaneously impressive and terrifying. The photographic evidence was particularly detailed. Karen had somehow captured my car from every conceivable angle. There were wide shots, close-ups, aerial views, and pretty sure one photo was taken from her second-story window. Timestamps marked each image, some taken at 6:17 a.m., others at 11:43 p.m. The woman clearly didn't sleep. Color-coded sticky notes highlighted specific infractions. One note, bright yellow and shaped like a warning sign, pointed out that on June 15th, my Mustang's rear bumper extended 2.3 inches beyond the community standard parking zone. Another, fluorescent pink, circled a supposed oil drip that was actually a shadow. The angle measurement section was a mathematical nightmare: protractor diagrams, trigonometric calculations, and what appeared to be complex statistical analysis of my parking precision. She had graphed the deviation of my car's positioning over time, complete with trend lines and standard deviation markers. "This is insane," Emma muttered, flipping through the pages. "Who does this?" I was equally mesmerized and horrified. One section detailed the psychological impact of irregular vehicle placement, with citations from what looked like legitimate urban planning journals. Had she actually researched this? The temporal parking analysis was particularly invasive. A spreadsheet tracked every single time I'd parked the Mustang over the past month. Average parking time, deviation from ideal positioning, even a heat map showing my most frequent parking locations. But the crown jewel was a section titled Community Standard Violation Impact Assessment. It included mock-ups of how my parking allegedly decreased neighborhood property values, complete with before and after illustrations that looked professionally designed. "Dad," Emma said, looking up from the binder, "I think Karen might be completely insane." I couldn't disagree. This wasn't just a complaint. This was a full-scale investigation. At the bottom of the binder, tucked into a clear plastic sleeve, was a formal demand. Karen wanted a corrective action plan for my parking habits, complete with a proposed schedule of parking rehabilitation. I looked at Emma. She looked at me. We both started laughing, but something told me Karen was dead serious. And this was far from over. The Maple Grove Estates Homeowners Association meeting was held in the community center, a beige building that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed the height of architectural excitement was a perfectly square window. I'd attended these meetings before, but nothing could have prepared me for Karen's presentation. Emma insisted on coming. "This is going to be legendary," she whispered as we walked in, barely containing her excitement. The room was packed. Apparently, word had spread about the impending parking drama. Normally, these meetings were as exciting as watching paint dry, discussions about lawn maintenance, trash can placement, and the occasional debate about holiday decorations. Tonight was different. Karen had transformed the community center's presentation area into what looked like a war room. Poster boards covered every available surface, color-coded charts, laser pointer, a PowerPoint presentation with a title that still makes me laugh, Driveway Deviance, a Neighborhood Under Siege. She was dressed for battle, a crisp blazer, pressed slacks, hair pulled back so tightly I was worried about potential structural damage to her scalp. The clipboard was, of course, prominently displayed. The HOA president, Mr. Thompson, a retired accountant with the personality of a filing cabinet, looked simultaneously terrified and fascinated. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, her voice cutting through the room like a freshly sharpened knife, "we are facing a critical threat to our community standards." She clicked her laser pointer. The first slide appeared. A blown-up photo of my Mustang, with geometric lines drawn across it like some kind of automotive crime scene investigation. "Exhibit A," she announced, "systematic parking irregularities threatening neighborhood integrity." I leaned over to Emma. "Is this really happening?" She was recording on her phone, trying desperately to suppress her laughter. The presentation was a masterpiece of bureaucratic insanity. Karen had charts comparing parking angles, graphs showing potential property value impact, and what appeared to be a risk assessment of my car's aggressive parking methodology. Her most damning evidence, the 2-degree parking angle deviation. 2 degrees, she emphasized, may seem insignificant to the untrained eye, but in a community of precision, 2 degrees is the difference between order and chaos. Mr. Thompson adjusted his glasses. Glenn, my retired math teacher neighbor, was trying so hard not to laugh he looked like he was having a medical emergency. When it was my turn to speak, I was ready. I pulled out my own folder, much thinner, but significantly more powerful. Property deed, local parking regulations, survey documents that proved without a doubt that my driveway was exactly that, my driveway. "Mr. Reynolds," Karen interrupted before I could speak, "this isn't about legalities. This is about community standards." The room held its breath. I unfolded my documents slowly, deliberately. "Actually," I said, "it's entirely about legalities." Emma was live streaming this on TikTok. I could already see the view count climbing. The HOA board members exchanged glances. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should review the documentation." Karen's perfectly applied makeup seemed to crack slightly. This was far from over, but for the first time, I realized I might just win this ridiculous battle. Emma leaned over and whispered, "Best. HOA. Meeting. ever. Some stories start with a bang. Mine started with a phone call that would go down in neighborhood legend. It was a crisp Saturday morning, the kind of day that makes you want to wash your car, tend to your lawn, maybe enjoy a cup of coffee on the porch. I was doing exactly that, carefully maneuvering my cherry red Mustang into its usual spot, when I first noticed something was different. Karen was standing on her perfectly manicured lawn, phone pressed to her ear, her body language screaming more dramatically than whatever conversation was happening. The yoga pants, the wireless earbuds, the clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. This was peak suburban warfare. Emma was inside, making breakfast. I could hear the sizzle of bacon and the faint sound of her TikTok algorithm doing its thing. Little did she know she was about to miss the performance of a lifetime. Yes, 911. Karen's voice carried across the street with the precision of a military communication. I need to report an emergency. I paused, slowly backed up the Mustang, watched. The 911 dispatcher's confusion was about to become my entertainment. Ma'am, the calm voice responded, this sounds like a non-emergency situation. Non-emergency. Karen's voice hit a pitch that could shatter windows. This is a critical threat to community safety. By now, neighbors were peeking out their windows. Glenn, my retired math teacher neighbor, was actually filming from his front porch. I could see him trying to suppress a laugh, his smartphone capturing every melodramatic moment. I'm reporting aggressive vehicular placement, Karen continued, gesturing wildly at my Mustang. This resident is deliberately parking in a manner that violates every known community standard. The dispatcher, bless their heart, was maintaining professional composure. Man, can you describe the specific emergency? Karen launched into a detailed explanation that sounded like a cross between a legal brief and a nervous breakdown. She described my parking angle, the supposed threat to neighborhood property values, the psychological trauma caused by my 2-degree parking deviation. I was torn between being horrified and finding the entire situation absolutely hilarious. Emma burst out of the house, bacon slice in hand. Dad, she whispered, is she seriously calling 911 about your parking? Before I could answer, 2 police cruisers pulled up. Lights on. Full response. The officers approached, clearly expecting something more serious than a parking dispute. Karen was gesturing, pointing, her clipboard now a weapon of suburban destruction. Ma'am, the senior officer said, is this an emergency? Absolutely, Karen proclaimed. This man is destroying our community one parking angle at a time. The look on the officers' faces was something between confusion, amusement, and professional restraint. My daughter was live streaming. The entire neighborhood was watching, and I was about to become a viral sensation. Some people dream of internet fame. I was living it, one ridiculous parking angle at a time. The aftermath of the 911 call was nothing short of suburban theater at its finest. 2 police cruisers, lights flashing, parked in front of my house like we were in the middle of a high-stakes crime scene. Karen stood to the side, clipboard clutched to her chest, looking like she just won an Oscar for most dramatic neighbor. Officer Rodriguez, a seasoned veteran who looked like he'd seen everything suburbia could throw at him, approached me first. His partner, a younger officer who was visibly trying to suppress a smile, hung back near the cruisers. Sir, Officer Rodriguez said, we received a call about a parking emergency. Emma, who had been documenting everything on her phone, stifled a laugh. I could see the TikTok views climbing in real time. I have all my documentation right here, I said calmly, pulling out the same folder I'd used at the whole meeting. Property deed, parking regulations, precise measurements showing I was, in fact, completely within my rights. Karen interjected, her voice reaching a pitch that could probably shatter crystal. He's deliberately parking at an improper angle. The senior officer raised an eyebrow. Man, is this a criminal matter? It's a community safety issue, Karen proclaimed, her clipboard now raised like a weapon of suburban warfare. Officer Rodriguez was a master of professional restraint. He carefully reviewed my documents, his expression a masterclass in controlled bemusement. The younger officer was losing his battle with suppressed laughter, turning slightly away to compose himself. "Let me get this straight," the officer said slowly. "You called 911 because your neighbor is parking his car on his own property, at a slightly different angle than you prefer." Karen's face went through a remarkable color transformation, white to red to a peculiar shade of purple that I'm pretty sure is medically inadvisable. "It's systematic neighborhood destruction," she insisted. The younger officer finally broke. A laugh escaped, quickly turned into a cough. Officer Rodriguez shot him a look that could freeze lava. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this is not a 911 emergency. This is a civil matter at best." Emma leaned over and whispered to me, "This is the greatest thing that's ever happened in suburban history." Karen wasn't done. She pulled out her meticulously prepared binder, the same one with color-coded charts and angle measurements. "I have evidence," she proclaimed. Officer Rodriguez flipped through the binder, his expression a mixture of professional courtesy and barely concealed amusement. "Ma'am, these are parking angles, not a criminal investigation." The final blow came when he handed the binder back to her and said the words that would become neighborhood legend. "If you have concerns about parking, I suggest speaking with the HOA or filing a civil complaint. This is not a police matter." Karen stood there, mouth open, clipboard hanging limply at her side. The neighborhood watched from windows and front porches. Glenn, my retired math teacher neighbor, was definitely recording this for posterity. As the police cruisers pulled away, Karen was left standing in the street, her elaborate plan of suburban domination in complete shambles. Emma turned to me, grinning. "Best Saturday ever." I couldn't argue. Sometimes the truth is the best defense against suburban madness. The 911 incident was the spark that lit the neighborhood powder keg. Turns out, Karen wasn't just targeting me. She was a long-standing terror of Maple Grove Estates, and everyone was ready to talk. It started with Glenn, my retired math teacher neighbor. The morning after the police incident, he showed up on my front porch with a casserole and a story that would change everything. "She tried to get my hammock removed," Glenn said, settling into a porch chair. "Claimed it violated some obscure HOA regulation about recreational equipment placement." Emma was taking notes on her phone, her journalistic instincts in full gear. "Tell me everything," she muttered. The stories started pouring in. Mrs. Rodriguez from 2 streets over shared how Karen had filed a complaint about her son's basketball hoop. The Johnsons talked about the time she measured their lawn grass with a ruler, claiming it was 3/4 of an inch too long. Mr. Peterson showed me a citation Karen had drafted about his wind chimes being acoustically disruptive. A WhatsApp group materialized overnight. Maple Grove Resistance became our unofficial name. Screenshots, stories, documentation. Everyone was sharing their Karen encounters. "This isn't just about my parking anymore," I told Emma. "This is about something bigger." The neighborhood had been a powder keg of suppressed frustration. Karen had been playing HOA enforcer for years, and nobody had pushed back. Until now. Social media became our weapon of choice. Emma, with her TikTok savvy, started compiling the stories. The 911 call video went viral, not just locally, but nationally. Millions of views. Comments sections filled with people sharing their own Karen stories. One viral post featured a compilation of Karen's most ridiculous complaints: the basketball hoop, the hammock, the wind chimes, my parking angle, each complaint more absurd than the last. Local news picked up the story. Suburban showdown. When HOA enforcement goes too far became the headline. Suddenly, we weren't just a neighborhood. We were a movement. The HOA board started receiving emails, lots of emails, from current residents, former residents, even people who had nothing to do with Maple Grove Estates. They were demanding accountability, sharing our story, backing us up. Glenn created a spreadsheet, a literal, color-coded, meticulously organized spreadsheet documenting every single one of Karen's complaints over the past 3 years. The level of detail would have made Karen proud. "This is citizen journalism at its finest," Emma declared, watching the view count climb. Neighbors who had previously avoided confrontation were now speaking up. Block parties were planned. Meetings were organized. We were no longer isolated homeowners. We were a community. The breaking point came when someone discovered Karen had been selectively enforcing HOA rules. Certain neighbors got a pass. Others were constantly harassed. The pattern was clear, and now it was documented. We're not just fighting about a parking angle anymore, I told Emma. We're fighting about community, about fairness. The resistance was growing. What started as a ridiculous dispute about my Mustang's parking angle had become something much larger. Karen had created her own nightmare, and the neighborhood was about to show her exactly what happens when you push people too far. The final confrontation wasn't dramatic. It was almost anticlimactic, which in suburban warfare is sometimes the most satisfying outcome. 2 months after the 911 incident, an official HOA hearing was called, not just any meeting, a full disciplinary review. The community center was packed. I'd never seen so many people at an HOA meeting in my life. Emma was there, of course, her phone ready to live stream every moment. Karen arrived precisely at 7:00 p.m., dressed in what I can only describe as professional confrontation attire. A crisp blazer, pressed slacks, hair pulled back so tightly I worried about potential structural damage to her scalp. The clipboard was, naturally, clutched to her chest like a shield. But something was different. The swagger was gone. The confidence that had fueled her months of neighborhood tyranny had been replaced by a nervous energy. The HOA board looked different too. Mr. Thompson, the retired accountant who usually ran these meetings with all the excitement of a tax audit, seemed almost animated. Glenn sat front and center, his meticulously prepared documentation spread out like a legal war room. The board will now hear testimony regarding multiple violations of community standards, Mr. Thompson began, specifically concerning harassment, misuse of HOA resources, and repeated frivolous complaints. Karen's eyes darted around the room. She'd gone from being the neighborhood enforcer to being the one under investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. Spreadsheets, video compilations, sworn statements from multiple neighbors. My parking angle was just the tip of the iceberg. They'd uncovered a pattern of systematic harassment that went back years. The most damning evidence, the 911 call. Played in full, it became a masterpiece of bureaucratic absurdity. People in the audience, who had lived under Karen's reign of terror for years, began to laugh. Not cruel laughter, but the kind of release that comes from finally standing up to a bully. Emma's live stream was breaking the internet. Millions were watching this suburban showdown. When it was Karen's turn to speak, she tried her usual tactics. Clipboard raised, voice sharp. But something was different. The room had changed. The neighbors who once cowered now sat tall, supported by each other. "This is a witch hunt," she proclaimed, but her voice lacked its previous fire. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "Ms. Johnson," he said formally, "the board has reviewed the evidence. We find multiple violations of community standards. The verdict was swift. Karen would be removed from all HOA committees, prohibited from filing non-substantive complaints, required to attend a mediation course, placed on a 2-year probation." The room erupted in applause. As she left, Karen tried one last dramatic gesture. "This isn't over," she proclaimed. Emma leaned over and whispered, "It kind of is, though." Afterwards, the neighborhood felt different, lighter. Neighbors who had avoided each other for years were now chatting, sharing stories, forming real connections. My Mustang sat in the driveway, parked at exactly whatever angle I wanted. "We did it," I told Emma. She grinned. "No, Dad, we did it." The suburban revolution was complete, and it all started with a 2-degree parking angle.